Howdy, one of y'all know who it is. Me, is Pikachu Reacts, and I think it's time to do the story finally. For the third part of my 300 subscriber special, you guys may be wondering why I had a three-part upload for the day. I've actually been working on lyrics for a song, but it's just not turning out right, and I wanted to do my 300 subscriber special, but it's been a month, and it's just not working out right, so I'm going to do this instead. For the final part of my 300 subscriber special, I brought back SMG4. A series I've been doing on my channel for a long time. And I did my daily Smashback episode, which ended up with an unsurprising outcome of Sephiroth beating the crap out of Bill Cipher. So let's end off the day well. Pikachu sat in disbelief, his ears and tail drooping in sorrow, his lifetime partner buried 6 feet under in the soil beneath him. All because of Team Rocket. One of their machines had gone haywire during an attempt to steal Pikachu, and it resulted in Ash snapping his neck. The electric rodent quivered, scratching slowly at the dirt beneath him, sparkling tears running down his scarlet cheeks and landing in the fresh dirt before being absorbed and disappeared. The funeral house ended days ago, yet Pikachu refused to move from the spot. Brock and Misty came by often to feed and water him, but he would pay them no mind. He would give them a grateful squeak, and then eat and drink before returning to the headstone and curling beside it, closing his deep brown eyes and falling asleep. Seasons began to change. Summer became winter, and even through the harsh cold and snow, he stayed where he was, refusing to admit defeat. The other Pokemon had been deeply saddened, but the only one that had been nearly as affected as he had been Bayleaf. But after a few months, even she had begun to move on, staying with Professor Oak. And if you guys can't tell this, Bayleaf actually has a really good deep bond with Ash, just like Pikachu does, which helps a lot in the story of this. And I'm actually going to turn the camera back on, why not? Me as well. Not knowing what to do with Ash's Pokemon, they stayed with the Professor, who had been unable to send them off to new trainers. Ash's water types were sent to live with Misty, and his ground and rock types were now with Brock in the gym. All Pokemon still had somewhere to go. Pikachu had many homes offered to him, from Misty, Brock, Max, May, Dawn, and even Gary, who was completely sincere in his offer, knowing how important he had been to Ash, but the rodent had turned them all away and stayed with Ash's trainer's side. Pikachu had even stolen his Pokeball from the Professor's facility, and the red and white orb lay beside him. As long as it was intact, he would remain Ash's Pokemon, and no one else could capture him. The snow drifted down on his yellow fur, melting to the moisture soaked his skin, forcing him to shiver violently, but he refused to move, trying to bury his face into the ground closer to where his partner lay. Tears trickled down his face as the memory of his death returned. Ash had been protecting him, and Meowth had been particularly impatient that day, caused the machine movements to become faster and more powerful when Ash strove to protect him, and had been tossed around like a ragdoll and died dead before he hit the ground. The winter slowly passed, and spring came, and Pikachu was pleased by the warm weather returning. To his dismay, grass began to grow over the grave, covering the soil that marked where he lay. Brock and Misty still came by regularly, and the cemetery employees also had taken to feeding the Pokemon, but despite this care, Pikachu was always in the same spot, growing thinner and weaker by the day. One summer came around, other Pokemon began to visit Pikachu, and most often Cubone. They would offer their comfort and try to convince Pikachu to move on, saddened by their state that once great like rodent. But they would all be chased away by the Pikachu, so that he could sit back down by the headstone. Somewhere in the depths of his mind, Pikachu knew that Ash would not be returning, but he could not bring himself to abandon his beloved trainer. Ash had stuck with him through thick and thin, and endangered his life, and not to mention losing it to protect him, something that not even the bravest trainers would do, and Pikachu could not betray that loyalty. Soon, weeks changed into months, and months transformed into years, 12 years in fact. The Pikachu had grown famous, and people from all around the world came to marvel at the creature that waited so dutifully for his friend to return, for the person that he would never be able to see again. His cameras flashed, hands stroked his filthy fur that he no longer bothered grooming, and on occasion people would pick him up to cuddle his weakened form. Some even had the bravery to try to carry him out of the cemetery, only to get to the front gates and receive a rather intense thunder shock and a brief glimpse of a yellow mouse scurrying back to the headstone marked with Ash Ketchum's name. a constant reminder of his leaving the Earth. Following the 13th anniversary of Ash's death, the mouse knew his time had come. His once beautiful sleek fur was now missing patches, and he'd started graying long ago, so intensely that his muzzle was almost completely white. His lightning bolt tail lay limply on the ground with no strength to hold it up in the air anymore. Hold it up in the air any longer. Once lively and bright brown eyes, so full of curiosity, were now dulled by age, and more often than not closed in slumber, hiding the white cataracts that had developed there. His joints ached from the cold, making it difficult to move without pain, and his old heart beat painfully in his chest, his breathing coming up in irregular gasps. Pikachu raised his head warily as he heard a voice call his name, and he glanced around the empty cemetery, searching for the source of the noise, but seeing no one. Laying his head back on the frosted grass, he closed his eyes only to hear the voice again. Standing painfully, he winced and stood on his back feet, peering into the darkness with his weakened eyes to find the noise. He saw the figure approach him, crouched to the ground warily, watching cautiously. Pikachu, it whispered, and his ears twitched. That voice was so familiar, and it was a voice he had not heard in 13 years. Pikachu repeated, and seemed somewhat thicker as it was being choked off by tears. Taking a careful step towards the figure, as it leaned down towards him, he finally saw his face, and the rodent gasped before leaping forward, and was surprised that he felt no pain in the gesture. He snuggled his nose deep into Ash's neck, cooing happily as Ash cried, his arm wrapped around his tiny friend. Pikachu, I'm sorry you waited for so long, he choked out. So sorry, little buddy. Can you forgive me? Pikachu merely continued making happy noises, refused to be parted from his trainer again, and together they turned and walked from the cemetery into the yawning darkness that the night provided. Misty walked carefully through the cemetery, her hair loose and her head bowed respectfully. Her feet guided her after being here so many times. Smiling gently at the sight of Pikachu asleep where he always was, she tiptoed over and laid the food before the Sparkle Mouse and waited for the scent to awaken the poor creature, but was surprised when it did not rouse him. Reaching out tentatively, she stroked his head, only to yank her hand back after touching the ice-cold fur. No warmth radiated from the small Pokemon, and she had no doubt at what happened. Tears formed in her cerulean eyes and began to fall onto his bright little head. Carefully removing the blanket that she had given him so long ago from behind the tombstone, emblazoned with the name Ash Ketchum, and placed it over Lisa's body, and made her way to the entrance of the cemetery to deliver the news, trying hard not to trip as tears for both her friends blurred her way. Here lies Pikachu, fierce battler, devoted friend, and the bravest of us all. May he rest in peace. 1996 to 2013. Pikachu looked at the tombstone for one last time before returning to his trainer's shoulder, who was examining his own rock that sat right next to Pikachu's. Sat right beside Pikachu's. Pikachu's had been made with breathtaking detail after being funded by millions of people who were inspired by his story. Embedded in the stone sat a red and white Pokeball with a lightning bolt stamp, an item that, despite his protectiveness over the 13 years he waited, he still despised. Turning a smiling rosette brown eyes to his companion, he breathed deeply before turning away. Well, Pikachu, he said softly, here comes the greatest adventure of all time. There's this story. It's called If It Takes Forever, I Will Wait For You. And I must say this now. This story is not my own. Not at all. It's Kipcha's story, which is very, very good, I have to say. This is now my 20th time reading this and all, and I still love it. If you guys want to read this yourself, I'll actually send a link in the server, in the Discord server, or I'll put it in the description of this video as well to copy it for you guys and keep it there forever. Bye.